In the hills of East Tennessee, a predator walked freely among the vulnerable. His crimes were swift, brutal, and for decades, largely unpunished. This is the story of Thomas Dee Huskey, known on the streets of Knoxville as Zoo Man, one of the most disturbing and legally tangled cases in the history of Knox County. Before we begin, consider the words of those who lived through this case. District Attorney Randy Nichols said, "He killed more people than anybody in the history of this county. I misjudged it tremendously. I never did see what it would turn into, and what it ultimately turned out to be, I did not see that." And from WBIR News, in the eyes of the law, Knoxville's first known serial killer got away with murder. Over several weeks in the summer and early fall of 1992, a killer took 4 women to a dead-end road called Cahaba Lane in East Knox County. After forcing them to have relations, he bound them, strangled them, and left their bodies to rot amid trash and debris. Was he a struggling individual with multiple personality disorder, or was he a cunning and manipulative killer? The answer may depend on who you ask. The 4 women whose lives were taken were Patricia Rose Anderson, Darlene Smith, Patricia Ann Johnson, and Susan East Stone. Due to the treatment of sex workers at the time, little personal information was preserved about these 4 women. They deserve to be remembered, not only as victims, but as human beings whose lives mattered. Before the murders began, there were warnings. A 30-year-old woman survived an encounter with Thomas Huskey that still haunts those who heard her testify. Trembling and weeping on the stand, she recalled her ordeal. She had just picked up breakfast on Magnolia Avenue and was headed back to a friend's apartment on 5th Avenue when Huskey stopped her on the street. He asked her how to get to an antique market. She began to give him directions, when suddenly he grabbed her arm and yanked her through his window, shoved a pistol under her arm, and drove away. He cursed her. He told her exactly what he planned to do to her. He drove to a barn near Chilhowee Park, close to the Knoxville Zoo, where he forced her to perform oral sex and raped her repeatedly. She noted that Huskey wore a T-shirt decorated with elephants and the phrase Tiger Zoo, a wild animal park in Kodak, where he had previously worked. He only fled when he saw his own shadow on the wall and became spooked. She escaped the barn after he drove away. She returned to a friend's apartment, took a bath, and waited until late that night before asking her aunt to take her to the hospital. She stated clearly that she was not on drugs when he abducted her. Despite her bravery in coming forward, her testimony was savaged by the defense. His attorneys told jurors she was, quote, "a cocaine addict and a liar who tells inconsistent tales." It was a pattern that would define this entire case, the vulnerable being discarded, dismissed, and disbelieved. Thomas Dee Huskey was known among the women working Magnolia Avenue as Zoo Man. They gave him that name because he told them he worked at the Knoxville Zoo, helping his father Frank tend to the elephants. Sometimes he took them to a place near the zoo. They feared him. He could be mean. Many stayed away from him for exactly that reason, but others needed the money, and for them, he was simply a hazard of survival. He often took women to Cahaba Lane, a remote stretch of road running parallel to Interstate 40, accessible only by traveling back roads. The area was littered with mattresses, trash, and debris. It was isolated, it was hidden, and it would become a graveyard. In February of 1992, Huskey went too far. A woman came to police stating that the man had roughed her up and robbed her while they were out in the woods. Officers were taken to the spot, and by grim coincidence, Huskey was there, in the middle of an act with another woman. Police arrested him. He was 31 years old. Upon news of his arrest, other women came forward with similar stories. But in the end, they all declined to cooperate with prosecutors. And so, he went free. This is the point where everything changed. Up until now, he had not killed his victims. It is believed that after his arrest, he made a calculated decision. He would no longer leave witnesses behind. On October 20th, 1992, a hunter discovered the first body near Cahaba Lane. It was Patricia Rose Anderson. She had been strangled, bound, and left beneath an old mattress. She was pregnant. Within days, 2 more bodies were found, and the skeletal remains of a 4th victim. All 4 women had prior records for prostitution. There were no witnesses, but Officer Presley remembered his encounter with Huskey in the woods just months before. Knox County Sheriff's Office headed to Sevier County, to a mobile home where Huskey lived with his parents. Armed with what would later prove to be a flawed search warrant, they confronted the man and searched his room. They found rope, similar to that used to bind the victims. They found jewelry matching pieces the victims had been wearing. Huskey was taken into custody. Detectives felt confident. The evidence seemed straightforward. They were wrong. His initial interview with investigators was completely unremarkable. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But in November of 1992, Huskey requested from his jail cell to speak with investigators again. Officer Davenport returned to speak with him. At first, Huskey appeared exactly the same as before. Davenport stepped out of the room briefly, and when he returned, he was confronted by someone who called himself Kyle. Demanding, demeaning, a bully. "Give me a cigarette," this voice said, "and I'll tell you everything you want to know. I'm Kyle. I hate Tommy." What followed was a chilling confession. Kyle described rapes, torture, and murder. He called the women his experiments. He said he did it to hurt Tommy. The contrast between the 2 personalities was stark. Thomas was mild-mannered. Kyle was brash. Thomas was left-handed. Kyle used his right. A 3rd personality, called Dax, an Englishman, also surfaced during trial, believed by some to be modeled after a character from the soap opera Days of Our Lives. Huskey claimed his mental illness stemmed from being sexually assaulted as a young boy by a woman named Connie. The names of several of his personalities, investigators noted, corresponded to street names near his childhood home, including Kyle. The trial of Thomas Dee Huskey became one of the most expensive, prolonged, and legally chaotic criminal proceedings in Tennessee history. The state spent nearly $500,000 on his defense, the most expensive criminal defense in the state's history. The legal battle stretched over 13 years. Judge Baumgartner ultimately told the court that the jury would be dismissed, split 6-6, not on the question of guilt, but on the question of responsibility. Sheriff Davenport later said of Kyle's courtroom performance, "I thought it was all an act. He had the voice down pretty good." Defense attorney Monsieur argued that Judge Baumgartner had engaged in outside communications with a potential witness, and that, combined with other accusations against both the judge and District Attorney Randy Nichols, had made a unanimous verdict impossible. In a particularly theatrical moment, Monsieur himself took the stand, in character as Kyle, to wrap up the defense. He later stated, "I like to think I gave Huskey the same degree of representation that was delivered to O.J. Simpson. I believe I did that, and I am proud." To this day, Monsieur maintains regular contact with Huskey and firmly believes in his client's innocence of the murders. One by one, the pillars of the prosecution's case were dismantled. The jewelry found in the family home, thrown out. The rope found in Huskey's bedroom, thrown out. His confession, deemed coerced, obtained after significant pressure from law enforcement, thrown out. District Attorney Nichols, facing the collapse of his case, said grimly, can I weave a web of circumstantial evidence. I'm going to make every effort. Monsieur countered that the confession was a fabrication invented by the alter ego to destroy his host personality, and that the details Kyle provided never actually matched the physical evidence. In the end, the case fell apart. After a mistrial due to a hung jury, the court scheduled a retrial, then removed Monsieur from representation without a hearing, citing his abusive approach to litigation. His motions and appeals had caused significant delays and placed an excessive burden on the court system. Huskey challenged the removal and won. The court found his Sixth Amendment right to counsel had been violated. The evidence was gone. The confession was gone. The witnesses had never come, and the case slowly suffocated under the weight of its own legal chaos. As of October 2025, the Tennessee Supreme Court let stand a lower court ruling that effectively ended the murder cases against Thomas Dee Huskey, citing numerous errors by the judge and improper conduct from both the prosecutors and defense attorneys. Thomas Dee Huskey is now a grandfather. He carries a 64-year sentence, but remains parole eligible. Here is the timeline of this case laid bare. June 1993, Huskey is indicted on murder charges. October 1995, a Knox County jury convicts Huskey of raping and robbing a Knoxville woman. May 1996, a Hamilton County jury convicts Huskey of raping, kidnapping, or robbing 3 sex workers in Knox County. February 1999, a Davidson County jury hangs in the Huskey murder cases. April 2004, a Hamilton County jury convicts Huskey of kidnapping and raping a prostitute. October 2025, the Tennessee Supreme Court lets stand a lower court ruling, effectively ending the murder cases against Huskey forever. 4 women were murdered. 5 others were terrorized, assaulted, robbed, and left to carry their trauma largely without justice. The man believed responsible walks the earth today, convicted of rape and kidnapping, but never of murder. Detective after detective who worked this case will tell you the same thing. He did it, and yet, in the eyes of the law, Knoxville's first known serial killer got away with murder.